still helps to articulate, this could still be a conflict of interest, is the deal. So like, I am an adjunct professor, I'm teaching a class here on school law, and I'm using Mayville High School, and I'm paying for a rental fee. That's fine, that's not a problem. If I'm a music teacher and I'm teaching lessons to students after school, that could be okay. But if I'm teaching lessons to them after school and I'm requiring them to come in and I'm charging them and it's impacted in their grade, huge no-no. So those are the kind of areas where you just want to make sure, yes, it's in the best interest of the student and the school to do it, but you're making profit and now it's a part of their grade. That's a conflict of interest. You cannot do that. So those are things that these policies help to articulate for anybody in our roles, and just kind of spells it out. So there's 3 of those for that right out of the gate. Then another section where things really have patterns, and then if you look at the Google Doc that I typed up for updates, it says the same thing over and over and over again. So when it comes to non-discrimination, this is about the hiring of administrators, the hiring of teachers, the hiring of support staff. But then it also does talk about equal educational opportunity, or educational access, and then also non-discrimination of students. So it's just one big Office of Civil Rights update, okay, that's being mandated, and what's being mandated is our record keeping of this. So this is something really important for the administrative team when this policy is updated, because this is spelling out to us, it's not even a guideline, this is the policy that's reflecting the laws on how we have to do record keeping. And I will say, historically, we don't have this, not at the level that it's looking for, so this is a change for us. Like, we've absolutely documented, we absolutely do have things recorded. But this is saying, we're not only going to record them, we're going to gather them a certain way, we're going to keep them. Our investigations need to be recorded, we need to be very methodical. So, and this is all coming from the Office of Civil Rights. So, absolutely have to be in compliance with that. So you see all those policies are updated to reflect this one recommendation. And then the next one, so now we're talking about non-discrimination and equal employment. When you talk about non-discrimination, you're talking about protected class. So gender, race, in our house, that'd be pretty much what we're looking at overall. So when it comes to harassment, so this is an employee anti-harassment policy. This is for administrators, this is teachers, and support staff. And with this, again, it's updating our investigation process, and it's updating the rights of the accused. It's spelling out timeline expectations. I think it actually gave a little bit of flexibility for a timeline, saying, hey, you know what? You have other duties that you're responsible for. There's not some 5-day window. If you don't get your investigation done, it's not supposed to be like that. And then it articulates this whole, how are we recording our documents and retaining them. So it came up over and over again. So these sets of policies, probably the largest portion of the update. Then a policy that I'm actually going to pass out a sheet of paper to everybody was the fund balance policy. So with that, it really, the timing of the fund balance policy was perfect because we had just experienced a presentation from Ryan about fund balance and about, hey, well, right now we have $50,000 that's been assigned to this. We have $100,000 that's been assigned for that. And he referred to the language that we have in our policy. Well, the fund balance policy itself, this update, which I'm going to pass out now, this is a good example of what you see when you go into board docs. So everything green is added language, which is a lot. So before we said we would have a non-spendable fund balance, restricted fund balance, committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, unassigned fund balance, but it didn't give you a descriptor on what it was. This one document tells us everything that you need to know about fund balance now. So you don't have to go to other resources. This one shares it. So in our discussion, the new language we wanted to have dialogue about. So I highlighted it in orange. So the KPI for fund balance has a certain dollar amount that was said was up for discussion. Well, it's a forced discussion now because it's right here in the policy. So while we said we can get to it later, we actually need to get to it now because it's right here in the policy. And by the way, you can update policies at any time. This is the Neola recommendation to update it, but the number in here, this is a board deal. So you could, it'd be very difficult if you came back every 3 months and changed the amount, right? But you're the board, this is your policy. Someone could call it to question, I'd have to bring it here and you would debate. So, the board shall ensure that adequate funds are reserved for the general fund to maintain a secure financial position whereby the Fund 10 fund balance shall not fall below, it was 15%. The committee's looking at it saying it could be 10%. So I didn't want to just make it 10% and sneak it by. We wanted to have a discussion about it. So the magic question is, this does need an edit. We wouldn't keep was 15% in there. So without a change from the room, we would just strike was 15 and put it at will not fall below 10. Now, we also had a presentation in Ryan's bit of information he shared with us that was about bond rating and the S&P and what does it mean to get a good bond rating. And with that, we know that if our fund balance drops significantly, it would impact our bond rating. So would the financial stability of the community, all those are variable. Well, when we looked at the document on bond rating, it said a good fund balance was anywhere between 8 to 15%. So it had a range. So like, okay, well, S&P saying this is an acceptable range. So
And you're not going to change what control the income of the college.
yeah.
No, it's the bill.
So the question is as a board, the policy committee, it's their job to go through the policy, scrub them to make the updates to bring to you. So this is one of those things where they could have just done that, but we said, hey, since it was such a timely conversation that came up, and we're saying that that KPI is a responsibility of the board, we didn't just want to unilaterally make a policy change and not talk about it.
And the big thing is, number one is your key performance indicator. It's going to help us hit that target. I really have a hard time seeing us drop significantly, but it's going to help us score better in the long run. 10% is a very healthy fund balance. That'd be the other thing. And lastly, I always say it does make a board education if the time, whether it be to mercy or anything, it does provide flexibility.
So that all sounds good to me, as the superintendent. Knowing that, I sure would try to stay out of that place.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know, if I'm here, like, hey, we're gonna try not to be at a 10%.
No,
We'll
I-
be very transparent,
Yes.
open. It's part of a strategic plan. Here's how the funds are being used with a
Correct.
plan to improve it as quickly as possible, right? So to me, at 10%, I think you're now just about short-term borrow at that point in time. We're in a
Correct.
very comfortable place right now. We've
About
been
90
doing consider that.
How close if we come to 15%?
We have not.
No, it's not
So-
very close to, it's,
Ryan shared at the last board meeting a historical piece. You haven't been nowhere near that.
Oh,
You haven't been
about
under 20.
26, really?
Yeah,
no, we're,
I know. Give me a second.
We're
It's in
between
the-
24
it's in
and
this
29.
document.
yeah, correct.
And what's that?
How close do we come to that at some point in the year, paying our bills?
We don't.
No,
We don't even
this
come
year.
close to the 15.
We would have been at 15%.
We're at 25.34. The prior 3 years, we were 27 to 28.
So, but we are.
We didn't even get under
increase the
15,
KPI
our lowest in November, December is our lowest.
Yeah, because then we can adjust fees.
You can adjust your KPI, and at that point, it helps you score better at the end of the day.
Another year, we went through.
Yeah, okay, so here's an example. If we made it to 10%,
They're working at it.
as a board policy,
Vans.
if your board policy said 10%, our KPI would say that we are failing to meet expectations at that point in time.
Yeah, so this would have to be
Correct.
adjusted
Yes.
based on whatever happens
Yeah.
with the policy.
Right. So,
Why do we want to change it?
Helps you score. Number
So,
one,
okay.
number two, adds flexibility.
so Joe's advocating for flexibility, saying like, listen, a fund balance of 10%, if you're looking at metrics like S&P, as far as our bond rating, it's fine, it's good. I'm sharing with you, if we get below 10%, we're most likely are looking at short-term borrowing. That's a hypothetical, I don't have the data to support it right now. But I definitely think that.
If
I
that was
also
the
would like to
10%, if that was the high during the year.
Yeah, right.
You'd be more.
That, I'd be
So-
shocked if we ever got there, and at the end of the day, the Board of Education would all have to agree to get there to 10%.
Right.
Not that we would ever get there, but I'm saying it's gonna help us score, and if something happens, for whatever reason, it does add that flexibility, and I don't necessarily see having a 15%, what's the point? So, because it's gonna help us score better in the long run as well, so. And I just don't see us, the entire board would have to agree. So.
How does changing that help us score better?
Well, I support it for all the reasons that Joe was saying. So first of all,
Frees up money.
we are essentially, if we went with this and say that 15% is the minimum for us, we're holding ourselves to a higher standard than outside entities do. We're holding ourselves to a higher standard than the S&P does. Which, there's nothing wrong with high expectations. I mean, I support high standards,
I
but
wanna be rated like everyone
you're
else.
almost penalizing yourself then for already being at a high standard. If we set our standard realistically and in line with what other entities do, then it looks more like we're exceeding it as we really are. So it's giving ourselves, as Joe said, it's the flexibility. I don't want to see us at 10%. I don't think anybody here wants to see that. But we could still meet our obligations and be responsible at that point.
So, when he was talking about a score, it would be our own score that we're giving ourselves and our new key performance indicator, which
Mhm.
ends up giving us an overall score on what we are sharing with our stakeholders of how are we doing with operations finance. Is we're gonna color up is what's gonna happen.
Did it
So
lower?
if we,
Did it lower?
so,
Did it lower it on our expense expectations?
so right now, what we're saying, if we were to, so right now, we're at exceeds expectations. So if you're saying-
According to what we had, a 10% fund balance would be fails to meet expectations.
Right.
Right.
So you
But
can have
according
a,
to the S&P, 10% is good.
yeah, and you can have a policy that says one thing, but you as a board are saying, that's fine, that's a policy. Here's what we care about. So they don't have to be 100%
Right.
synced. It's still, it's pretty crazy to have, well, your fund balance policy says you need to have 10%, but in the meantime, if you're at 10%, you are failing to meet expectations, Scott. It's kind of a-
But I also
You
see
don't
that,
have to.
why wouldn't you add flexibility if there ever was an emergency, a time arises, something happens, whatever, you would not want to stifle yourself into non-flexibility. So,
Now, is the 10% and the non-suspendable fund balance?
Yeah, so right now, actually, good job, because we learned about that at the last board meeting. So right now, our 25.34%, none of that is assigned. He's only reporting the unassigned. So we have $150,000 that is dedicated towards other stuff. That's not rolled up into the 25.34%. So you as a board, you could say, we want $1 million to go towards something, right? We still have the funds, like Dick is just asking about, so we'd still have the funds in our account. We look at a report like that was just read tonight, it would look very similar, but there's $1 million set aside for something. With that, this number then would change, because that has been assigned. We're only reporting on the unassigned, so interesting dynamic. So what could happen is that if we are strategic and we're saying, this is what we're doing with the fund balance, we will be using it at a certain point in time, so you're gonna assign it, that would lower this score then, the way it is. And we would be, if we did a big chunk of it, we could end up being meets your expectations, even though the dollars are sitting there and you're still using them for strategic planning. So I guess that kind of advocates with Joe's flexibility that he was discussing. I guess the tough part for me is I've really gone through administrative boot camp throughout the years, and the 10% piece is pretty low from all of my training. In the meantime, looking at the information, hearing what you have to say, it's like, hey, I'm fine, like, we're good. The district's in a good financial position when it comes to that. The one part would be this though, if there's a metric of 10%, right? And we have a board that all said, like Jenny, you just said out loud, hey, I'm good with lowering that, because looking at where's the bar set in the nation, this is acceptable, this is a good number, right? This actually shows stability. Okay, that's what you just shared right now, because you also said on the other side, hey, but I don't want to go there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, I could be sitting here at the table with a different crew 5 years from now, and they say your fund balance policy is 10%.
We're gonna be
Run
down to
that thing down, and you're gonna do it, Scott. And I
That's-
would say, well, let me share with you the story, let me share with you all the information, are you sure you wanna do that? But they're the board, so the board is.
I have a hard time even in the future, I have a hard time thinking that, because you still have an entire board.
You have a 7-member board.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's a very strong step.
That exactly was my concern. I'm not worried about this board. That has not been a concern on the board I've been participating with for all these years. But knowing the political climate, that bothers me, because there are a lot of people who have a real hard time with our fund balance. And I'd hate to see the board change till we could end up in financial problem. Times change. I mean, you could do it, you could reduce it in the future if you had to. And still stay safe at 10% and use some of that money, but, boy, that bothers me politically and the possibilities in the future.
In terms of flexibility, the board can change that at any time, correct?
Oh, yeah,
Correct, yeah.
for sure. So now the question is so it's
So if there's
like,
an emergency.
so there's a
we need
large,
to-
totally. So there's a large policy update right now. Here's the key part though. If you were to say fund balance policy is 10%, we get to that metric, and then 6 months later, someone decides to call this to question, and we're doing what we've been open about it, talked about it. Next thing you know, they change the policy, say, that needs to be 20%. Like, okay, now what? So it's like, yeah, there's flexibility, but there is a point of, like, okay, you hit that number, how do you get back up again? It's gonna take a while, right? Drastic measures could have to occur all of a sudden in order to do that. So, we've gotta do something, right? Is the deal. So, is it tonight that something is occurring? Is it, because all the rest of the policies, literally, please check them out. They've covered the basics of what they're about. Those 2 resources absolutely cover everything in them, and the best way to learn about the policy updates is to go and look at each one, which we did do. So we looked at this. So this was the one that in all of our discussions said, well, we better bring that to the whole group. So I could use a recommendation, because the next round, so that what happens is you have first reading that comes through this. And so it used to be first reading, second reading, and now through Neola, it's superintendent presentation on the policies, 1 reading approved. What happens? So I could just use some feedback on my next steps with this. I guess the whole policy committee.
I get this, my thought is that, I don't have a problem changing it. I think this is something that would need to be reviewed every year because of board changes.
Absolutely.
You know, it's perfect. That's reviewed every year.
Yeah.
So it naturally covers
It would
it.
have to be reviewed every year just to not just bypass it and don't worry about it, we're at 25% or down 15% and all of a sudden, well, you get a couple board changes and then it gets narrower, and so I think if it's reviewed every year, it could be, might be changed, many times, but if it's reviewed every year, I think it could be kept in balance.
And now, I would say I would have to put that on my to-do list, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not normally done.
Right,
Well, now it is every year.
okay.
And so one of the things maybe we want to do is we want to put in here, like, the number that is set by the board. So it's just embedded into it. So the board's fund balance policy is a minimum of 10%. We can celebrate that the district is currently at 25.34%. That way you'll see naturally every single year, it won't be slipping away from us. So we can make that edit in this one document, which would therefore automatically result in looking at that metric all the time. So,
I see Dick thinking,
It really don't make much difference, okay? Because, we tax to the maximum, okay, and we're just, there's no
Yeah.
excess there whatsoever.
Yep.
And we're right at that, might have to use some fund balance, or we might gain a little.
And we're considered in the state of Wisconsin a low spending district, we're actually getting more aid because of it. So we have a lot of data points to show. The reason why we tax what we do is because we need to. So I'm good with what both gentlemen said to my left and to my right.
Stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight.
So-
If everything goes wrong, it could get to 10% in a hurry.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's gonna happen is I'm gonna edit this policy then, so when you go into the drafts, it'll show 10%. Okay, so you don't have to vote on it, I just need to know the policy committee that I'm not going rogue on everybody, so I'm striking out the 15%, so when you go and look at the policy updates, you will see that that's just not there.
And then we should be filling numbers in the rest of the places here too, accordingly.
Yeah, yes, so as a board, that's your opportunity, so you literally could change the overall, because really what it needs to be, and it doesn't say that on here, I'm gonna investigate, is it the unassigned, right? Unassigned, I was just speaking to unassigned. This dollar amount up there of 25.34% is our unassigned fund balance. So maybe what we wanna do is, to maintain a secure financial position, the fund balance the unassigned fund balance shall not fall below 10%.
Correct.
How about that?
Yep.
All right, I like it, that makes sense to me.
This is a standard for all government entities.
Yeah, absolutely is. So, but I always say, you have to have some type of flexibility if whatever arises.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be reviewed.
Perfect, so thank you for that, thanks for all the dialogue. The only piece that I would say on the policy updates and my notes, when you get to the policy 1213, 3213, and 4213, those are the student supervision and welfare piece. And there was a theme there, and it made it very clear that the board expects that all administrators are responsible for taking steps to monitor and maintain student welfare. So it means playground supervisors, teachers, anytime cafeteria, they're here, we're responsible to monitor. Okay, that's what it comes down to, that's what the roundtable is about. And so that's all coming out of the Department of Justice for school safety. So how do we keep our kids safe? We monitor them. So that would be it for all of my updates for tonight. I knew it would take a little bit longer, so it's a light agenda.
Well, what you got in there is just about all the meat of the school, if you had all these policies.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a very big update.
All right, thank you. Becky, you got anything going on?
Not really. We've got
Okay.
assessments going on right now. We had math night last week, and I think, Bob, are you gonna report a little bit
No,
more
go
on
ahead,
math night?
Is that
Math night, what took place last Tuesday? We had 85 students and 40 families total show up for the evening from 5 to 7. Families could stay for as long as they wanted to and get a chance for the kids to show moms and dads and family members who came along what's going on in math and giving the kids an opportunity to be the directors and the leaders and share that with their families. It was an amazing night. It was fun to see. We had everybody all in the same building and lots of activities for families to do. And really, that's all I've got tonight. I've got a short one.
okay? Nice.
You got basketball game.
And
to go to.
basketball game to get to, yep.
Bob,
Just to add on to math night, there were 4 activities selected for each grade level, so when parents came in, they could try one or all, depending on their time available. And each of these activities were game format and learning mathematics and pulled from each of the curriculum bridges from kindergarten to grade 5.